Uh, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. This is Preacher Mars, the host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show. Hope you're doing well. It's Wednesday, it's the middle of the week. I thought I'd pick a topic that was a little bit timely. Um, Many of you have already been talking about this topic. I thought it was interesting to, I thought it'd be interesting to kind of look at the pros and cons, the whole idea of vaccine, where it comes from. A lot of people have a lot of reservations and anxiety about vaccine. A lot of people have a lot of anxiety around the COVID vaccine. And a lot of times it's really having an understanding of health history, which we're not really being privy to. We are presented things in terms of vaccines, but we really don't know the process of how they come to market. Even more so than the process of how they come to market, the process of how they're tested. A lot of misinformation has gone on in terms of vaccination, the recent vaccinations that have a lot to do with COVID. And now these vaccinations come even more into play because we have a new variant, the Delta variant. I think it'd be, I want to say, I'd be disingenuous if I told you, hey, not to take the vaccine, to take the vaccine. I've shared on the show before I had COVID. And I'll be honest, I took the vaccine. I have my own personal reasons why I took the vaccine and my own history, my own personal history issues about why I took the vaccine. But I think it's interesting to let's flip the script a little bit. Let's take the fear and anxiety out of it. Let's look at the quotients of information that are being put out, good, bad, and in between. This is the first time in my life, though, I've seen a health scare, if you will, really be politicized. I mean, we've had other things, Legionnaire's disease, H1N1, SARS. We've had all of those things, but they never had the deep impact on the American health psyche. And in that space, I think it's really important for us to be able to look and ask the right questions, to do some research, to understand, pull back the curtain a little bit, and get away from the corner store talk, the barbershop talk, the scare tactics, because the reality is people are dying. And a lot of people don't understand that a majority of the people who died from COVID, they died without the benefit of having a vaccine. They died without the benefit of having a solution. They died without the benefit of knowing exactly what the virus was, how it affect people, and literally, how we could police ourselves. So for that, this show is dedicated. I'm calling it the Vaccination Fascination. And what I want to do is demystify a lot of these things about vaccinations and allow people to make really, the serious choices and informed choices about whether you take a vaccine or you don't take a vaccine. Like I said, my advocacy is not for you to do one or the other. I will play devil's advocate in some regards, but I'm going to try and do it in an educated manner to give you guys a little bit of understanding of the whole flow of how vaccines come together. Vaccines overall have a place in American society. In this current situation, this current atmosphere, people have questioned that. And I'm like, people have legitimate questions about healthcare and things like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you put things in a box, when you move it from the random to a very specific clarity about what you're going to do about healthcare and what you're going to do about healthcare in its That's ah, there you are. I know you're looking at your screen going, that's a good looking black man. And you're right. I'm Preacher Moss, and you're not. Today, I want to talk about Olive Branch Muslim Family Services, better known as the people who help people. And I need you to help the people who help people so they can continue to, you guess it, help people. Get it? Got it? Good. Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. Action you can see, compassion you can feel. Graphic now. All right, everybody. Sorry about that. Had some technical difficulties, which is it happens in this situation. But before we get started, I want to give a shout out, really, to all the frontline workers who have been heroes and at the same time been villainized for their steadfastness in dealing with COVID related issues, and people who have taken ill and people who have lost their lives. I feel like they've been undervalued in a number of ways, and in aspects of their importance. They have been paramount to the fight against COVID. People not understanding that when you stand in the space of people who have an illness that can kill you and you show up anyway, there is something not only noble, there's something divine about these particular workers. So let me be the first to say a shout out to all of the people that work on the front lines, and also the people that give the COVID test, people who readily put themselves in danger. I think the only thing that could be roughly similar are the people that go off to war and put themselves in harm's way, and the police that put themselves in harm's way, not knowing where it's coming from. And COVID was interesting because to solve COVID, you have to endanger yourself. So that's number one. I also want to give a shout out for anybody who's coming on the show for the first time. I would encourage you to get into the comment section, share your thoughts, your ideas, your concepts, what you agree with, what you don't agree with. I think this particular type of platform is really, really helpful for us to get out our ideas, if you will. And like I said, get in the comment section. I'm not really worried about notifications and stuff like that. I'm actually happy because we were up to 168 subscriptions, alhamdulillah. But I think sometimes you have to get back to community talk. And so for maybe this episode and a couple other episodes, I really want to get back to community talk in terms of what the community needs and what they're thinking. I think it's so important that we share our ideas with folks and make sure that, we have a dialogue. And dialogue has been something that's been missing with this whole COVID situation, because you have people who have politicized life and death. Okay. So let me give a shout out. First of all, to my stars in the building, if you will. Let's roll them out. First of all, we got Sister Ree. Sister Ree is on her way from Miami, coming back to Houston. Safe travels to you, Sister Ree. Make sure that you quarantine, because Florida is one of those hot spots. Make sure that you're feeling right and you do some self-care, and make sure you give yourself some downtime to get some rest. May Allah be pleased with you going down to Miami with your friend and assisting her after her surgery. That's what friends are for. That's what families are for. So big shout out to you, Sister Ree. Next up, we got Sister Christy Santiago. How are you doing, sister? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We hope that you're doing well. Of course, we talked a little bit about your transition coming back to the great state of Texas. We hope that transition is smooth, and making educational choices is a very important thing. And I said this on the show. I think you were on, but making educational choices is very, very important. There's something akin to making life choices and health choices, but education is a gateway to so many different things. It's a gateway to so many different things. It should not be underestimated. Educate yourself. And I remind all of us every day, if you get a chance, educate yourself, learn something new. Thank you, Sister Santiago. And we got my little brother, Johnny L. Thomas. What's up, JT? It's you up tonight, brother. The Bucks got to do it tonight. They're building the wall for Giannis. But more importantly, man, I appreciate you coming on the show and supporting this platform and what your brother does. Feel free to jump in this, because we've had these talks about vaccines and things like that. So I kind of want to give a little bit of history of vaccines. I want to talk about some of the myths that are out there, debunk a few things, but also bring reality to things that are true about vaccines. This is not a perfect science. And I think that is the thing. People believe that vaccines are 100%. They're not 100%. We're going to talk about that, how you get to a vaccine. And we got Brother Altaf Rashid, my man, straight up, straight down, Mr. 6 o'clock, our Canadian ambassador to the show. How are you, beloved? Thank you for coming on. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our Canadian ambassador, make sure the quality of the show works on this side of the border and that side of the border. I know in Canada, Toronto, Ontario, there was a really, really big issue about not just the vaccines, but the availability of vaccines. Because at some point in time, Canada didn't have enough vaccines. And Canada has undergone numerous lockdowns. I know they're opening up stuff now, But I think it's really, really interesting to get your perspective on that. So I'm going to be leaning on you. Look for me when I throw you a question. Okay. Next up, Sister Janice Tuff, my beloved sister from Seattle. How are you in the great Northwest? I hope things have cooled down for you. I have watched weather reports, and I kind of worry. I fear for you because it seems like the state of Washington and Oregon are on fire. So I hope that you guys get some relief. You know, I appreciate you. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sister Tough, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I hope that you join in this discussion today. All right. Next up, we got our consultant producer, Sister Satana, who you saw starring yesterday on yesterday's show, speaking about the art of crying Karen, which is interesting because there is some Karen-like issues in the whole vaccine debate. If you understand patterns, and many of you do, if you understand patterns and people work patterns that work, and if it's successful over here, they merely apply it to another situation and attach their arguments or their causes to specifics that tend to have shared arguments or shared doubts, and they make the argument the same way. I would even offer that some of the larger arguments are being made about vaccine are actually being made by majority of women. Yes, a majority of women have led this whole thing about vaccines. Yeah, ironically, talking about critical race theory. By a lot of women have led the argument about critical race theory because education is being seen and framed more so as a female issue. So, um, that being said, I don't want to get too far off the track. So, to Sister Satana wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, let's talk about vaccines. Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to Brother Ahmed Kasim. How you doing, beloved? Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm going to check that out on Facebook when we get a chance. Hope you're doing well, brother. Thank you so much for joining our platform today. I've labeled this vaccination fascination. Now, let me tell you why I did it. Okay, let me tell you why um, and shout out to Sister Tana. I missed your text. So thank you for correcting that. Normally we go a certain way, but we had some technical difficulties. I dropped the ball on that. So thank you, Sister Tana, for cleaning that up. Talking about the vaccination fascination, brothers and sisters, what's really, really been interesting is that people have been able to compartmentalize history as it applies to healthcare. Um, and they've been able to delineate healthcare and health scare. Let me say it again: healthcare and health scare. See, healthcare is when you're asking questions, health scare is when people are giving you information and they are scaring you about investigating the questions that they are asking. This is the whole aspect of myth. This is the whole aspect of, you know, playing on things that happen in history. Now, let's be really, really honest. All of us, pretty much all of us watching the show, have taken a vaccine, a tetanus shot, a rubella shot. The reason we don't have polio is that they came up with a solution for polio way back in the day. And measles and chickenpox and communicable diseases, they constantly were working to get rid of those things because those diseases had an amazingly negative impact on young lives, children lives. So the aspect of vaccines really, at the onset, really had to do with quality of life for children. All of us know that if you have kids or you went to school, you could not go to school without your vaccines. You couldn't go to school without the vaccines. And there was an economy of vaccines, and the overall distrust of the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, led people to believe that something could run awry if given the right opportunities, the right situations, scenarios. It could run awry. We talked about social media. What was the thing about social media that we spoke about? I kind of harped on is, social media lent to the fact that it was designed to bring out in a situation the best in us, the best good in us. But it leaves bare the fact that it can also be a situation where, in the wrong hands, it can bring out the worst. It can bring out the best potential. It can bring out the worst potential. Healthcare in America has been an anomaly because there's levels to it. There's levels to it. My first understanding of healthcare in America had largely to do with slavery. In fact, at a very young age, I saw it was like a movie of the week. It was called Roots, based on a book written by Alex Haley. And there was a character, the central character's name was Kunta Kinte, but they called him Toby. And of course, he was a slave, but and I'm not talking about the merits of the book. It was plagiarized. I'm not going to get into that. But there's a scene where John Amos, who plays an adult Toby, keeps running away. And they give him a choice to cut off his private part or to cut off his foot. They cut off his foot. And I have a cousin who's always a spoiler, but he mentioned that, man, if they really cut off that foot, yeah, he would have pretty much died by then. They really didn't have advanced medicine for that type of stuff, infections and things like that. It was amazing. It's amazing. And I really began to look at the fact that it is stratified. When you talk about the accessibility to healthcare, there are places in the suburbs that have wonderful hospitals, but if you go in the inner cities, you got a bunch of urgent cares, right? Which in the urgent care populate you before you get to the emergency room, if you can get there. It's almost like the liquor store, the church, or the mosque. But the thing I think is important, and anybody can feel free to jump in. Shout out Walaikum Assalam Rahmatullah Barakatuh, Brother Eric. Shout out to you. I think the thing that's important is understanding that people back then had shared history. Like there was a standard of care. And when I say a standard of care, the standard of care of how people receive medical attention, but it didn't disparage the fact that there was suitable medicine, and whether it's farming, whether it was prescriptions, whatever, there was suitable medicine. It's just how it was presented to people and if it was accessible. When we start talking about this whole vaccine thing, I know there was a big dust up in the African American community because we were saying, hey, we don't know what's in that stuff. I said, I don't know what's in that stuff. I call myself out. And one of the things I put out there, like a lot of people said, I read the book Bad Blood, which was a Tuskegee syphilis experiment where a bunch of Tuskegee farmers were injected with syphilis under the auspices that they were going to get free health care. There's that word again, free health care. And they were injected with syphilis, and it was an experiment to track how quickly syphilis would proliferate through that community. It was not a vaccine, though. It was an experiment, a very horrific experiment. And if you want to know, Black folk, we were not the only ones to undergo those things. Native Americans underwent them. You have a whole culture of the Nuremberg trials that brought out the fact that German doctors performed unethical surgeries on unethical procedures and operations on Jewish inmates, not Jewish inmates, but Jewish prisoners during World War II. So you have this thing. But I think the thing that's missing, brothers and sisters, as we talk about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, it lacks context because that, brothers and sisters, was not a pandemic. Understanding what a pandemic is changes the whole ball game. A pandemic is a situation whereby you not only have to be concerned about your health, but you have to be concerned about the health of the people around you. I always ask the question, and here's a fair question. If we all know that diabetes can kill you, cancer could kill you, if they came up with a vaccine for it, would people take that vaccine? Would people forego this whole idea for a chance to be healed, for a chance to have a high quality of life? It was the same argument about the COVID-19 vaccine. And the thing that was not put out in the news is the fact that you have legions of doctors. Hear me now. Legions of doctors who go through simulations that this thing can happen. One of the quote unquote the stuff Restimivir um, vaccination that Trump took at Walter Reed, and he touted highly. It was a failed vaccine for Ebola. And I say, why am I saying that? Because they are constantly in the process of coming up with vaccines and medications. Healthcare, just like vaccinations and research, is about probability. It's about probability. And the fight that really is not being talked about is it's really about the permissions given to pharmaceuticals to administer these drugs. Studies had already been going on before the pandemic at National Institutes of Health all around the world. Scientists have been working on these things. And when a crisis presents itself, they look for the best option. And this may not be comforting, but I think it needs to be said. What I'm saying is, don't feel like you're in this economy of not knowing. Do your research. Whether you take the vaccine or not, understand you've already been indoctrinated. You've been taking vaccines, you've been taking medications. If a doctor gave you a medication because you had cancer, and he said take chemotherapy, those are just, if not more intrusive than taking a vaccine. You're looking at situations, you're looking at scenarios where you have to make a choice. Is it worth my while? So taking the vaccine, it was interesting because this is one of the first times in history, not first times in history, I take that back. We've had this happen before, but at a grand scale, we have people who connected taking a vaccine to you are taking away my democracy. A very, very difficult argument to make. If you make me take the vaccine, you're taking my democracy. I have a right not to take the vaccine. Well, then that means that if you're sick and I'm trying not to be sick, you're kind of impeding on my democracy too, my quality of life. And so the give and take, brothers and sisters, the tug has been that people just don't want to say that. Clearly, in a lot of regards, I look around and I'm like, people are going to do what they want to do. It's just more so an issue whereby what are the ramifications? If you look at Wuhan, the amount of people and death in Wuhan, probably less than 50,000, less than 40,000. Their style of government, communism, allowed them to shut down everything. The people didn't have a choice. The idea of holding on to my democracy here in the United States led to, let's say it, no vaccine, particularly with no vaccine, led to over 600,000 lives lost. So when the vaccine presented itself, people had a quandary. Do we continue going the route we're going to go? Or do we do something about it? Now, there's a lot of arguments to be made about taking a vaccine, not taking a vaccine. People go, oh, so and so, 3, 4 people died. You're talking about millions and millions of people who took a vaccine. If you're looking at it in terms of ratio, it's a very small amount. That doesn't mean that things don't happen. That doesn't mean that a vaccine could be detrimental to you. But we have to be careful both ways about putting out blanket statements that a vaccine is going to do X, Y, and Z or is not going to do X, Y, and Z. And understanding the economy of information as you move forward. I'll give you guys a little information. There was there was years ago. There was a group of scientists. They were like the oddball crew, you know. So it's like you work on your defined position, and then you have position time to work on, you know, what you wanted to work on. And they were trying to find sort of like a retrovirus to combat cancer. And it went to, you know, the RN thing and went through. And at some point in time, they thought they had something that could fight against cancer, that can strengthen the cells. They went through all these trials and research. And long story short, um, the data didn't support the results. The data didn't, it didn't support the results. It was a flop. That's what I'm saying. So all this energy, and it didn't work out. But around that time, in the early 80s, a man came up with a skin lesion. And in San Francisco, a bunch of men started exhibiting these skin lesions that would lead to decreased immuno health, if you will, better known as AIDS, autoimmune disease. It led to basically AIDS. And this is not, don't get me wrong, this is not some statement on gender choices. I'm talking about health. See what I'm saying? Trying to keep it simple. Simple. What happened was, brothers and sisters, people started turning with AIDS. That started to be the gay community. Then it started to be the heterosexual community. They were looking for something to deal with it. Ironically, what happened was that failed experiment trying to find a retrovirus for cancer actually fit the mold to be able to help people who had AIDS. It was the groundwork and the foundation for AZT, an active agent. Now, brothers and sisters, I want you to think about this. It came to market relatively quickly. We're not talking about waiting 10 years. It came to market relatively quickly. Almost like the vaccine that we're dealing with now, the Pfizer's and the Moderna and the Johnson and Johnson, because they have been working on it. Imagine, for those who say has been tested, imagine if there's an AIDS breakout and you have to do 10 years of testing. You have to do 10 years of testing to come up with this retrovirus to help people. How many lives would we have lost? You know, because again, when they say, you know, it's in the gay community, that means it's everywhere. Because, you know, people are not discriminate. People, you know, people have their proclivities, whatever. You know, it spread. It didn't matter. Just like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. When it's out there, it's out there. But my point is, because of that retrovirus, they were able to directly deal with AIDS in a record amount of time with less technology, less data that we're dealing with right now. And they didn't have to wait 10 years. I think the wait was like 2 years. They were able to give it out. Can you imagine what the explosion would have been if we sat around waiting for 10 years? Hence the argument about the COVID vaccine. What would it have been if we sat around 10, 5, 15 years waiting for a trial while people were dying? So it's easy to make the argument both ways. I'm going to take it because I need to protect myself with this person. I'm not going to be taken because I don't know what's in it. But the point is, you have to make an educated decision. In words of Dick Gregory, you got to choose a side. Here's the deal: choosing a side does not mean that you are stuck to you. Choosing a side does not mean that you don't have to educate yourself about the other side. See, because if you're educating the other side, educating yourself about the other side, and they're doing likewise, and what you have is a consensus, and then it's not politicized. You know, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci talked about the way things are right now. We're literally going to have two Americas. One America is vaccinated, another America is unvaccinated. When I heard it, I thought about it in conception. I said, it is true. He's 100% right. Because if you were forced to wear a scarlet letter that said I was unvaccinated, I was vaccinated, then you have anarchy. The blessing or the privilege of anonymity allows us to continue to have these arguments. So you have pockets around the United States where people have not taken the vaccines, and those areas are being hard hit: Missouri, Mississippi, Arkansas. I mean, I named a bunch of them. This was not to scare you, though. This is the point where I say, hey, those states had access to these vaccines. They did not take the vaccine. They did not promote them. I mean, I was telling Sister Satana, the thing that actually got me on this was a rapper, a cash money millionaire, a rapper named Juvenile had a hit called "Back That Back That Thing Up," and he recently remixed the song. They said, "Back that backs up." You're a big, strong brother once you back that backs up. You're a fine young sister once you back that backs up. And I remember the interview earlier today when I watched, they asked him, he said, I was not in favor of the vaccine. He said, but my daughter had to go to college. And as a requirement of her going to college, she had to have a vaccine. And he said, wait a minute, before you take it, something happens to you. I'm going to take it first and make sure it's all right. He took it, he was all right. She took it, she was all right. But he said, I realized what the argument was. And he realized that, hey, man, nothing, hey, this is not an exact science. You know, we don't even know what our pre-existing conditions are. We could be sick right now. We don't know. But you have to leave it to faith, and you also have to leave it to information. That's all I got to talk about today. Let's go to our sponsors. So I'll get you out of here on time. Go Bucks. Okay, so we're going to give a shout out to sponsor BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. You can call 1-888-496-6845. Again, that's 1-888-496-6845. I want to give a shout out to a sponsor, Miss Maxine BK Esquire, who that's her company. We'll give her a shout out. Also, a shout out to some people who've been under the weather, Sister Lorraine Kitchen, as well as Mr. Kendrick Samuels. Wishing you guys speedy recovery. May Allah give you shifa. And now we also want to give a shout out to Bayan Islamic Graduate School. Again, that's Bayan Islamic Graduate School. You can go to bayanonline.org. Again, that's bayanonline.org. If you're pondering getting a quality graduate level education, whether it's a master's or PhD, check them out. Go to bayanonline.org and get the feeling. Now I'm going to say get the feeling about yourself. Just get the feeling about what's possible for yourself. All right? I'm going to get out of here. You guys have been amazing. God bless you. Talk to you soon. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Preach Moss, SOS.
Hey everybody, this is your brother Preacher Moss. Listen, I hope that you enjoyed your shout out show experience. We'll be back with the next show, the next shout out show. A simple ask before you go, please help your brother out. Click that subscribe button, click that notify button, and I'll see you again on this side of the microphone.